Yakuza is a franchise that is most well known for its video games, and that's for good reason. Considering the series isn't even 20 years old yet and there are 17 games, that's a lot of games, even for series that are way older than that. What not everybody knows about though is just how many times the series has been adapted into other forms of media. So that's what I'm here to talk about today, the wild world of Yakuza adaptations. I'll be going in the order that each of these adaptations were released, and I won't be doing an in-depth analysis of each of them, more so just a quick overview. If you'd like to see me cover any of these topics more in depth, let me know in the comments below and I'd be happy to do so at a later date. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. It shows your support for the channel and I very much appreciate it. Without any further ado, let's get right into the video. Up first, we have the 2006 short film, Like a Dragon Prologue. This movie is a tie-in prequel to the original Yakuza game, and it shows the lead-up to Kiryu's decade in prison. It's also only about 40 minutes long, not counting the credits, and it's free on YouTube, subbed in English, so it's very easy to watch this one. The movie actually opens up by showing us how Yumi's parents were killed, which was violently and in public, and how she ends up at the Sunflower Orphanage. This is actually the neat thing about this movie, is that the first half of it show Kiryu, Nishiki, and Yumi as children at the Sunflower Orphanage. I think this is great for the movie because, especially with the context of the only game at the time being out being the first game, all we knew about Kiryu, Nishiki, and Yumi's childhoods is just what we'd heard about. We never actually saw anything in the game. And I don't think we've ever seen anything in the actual games going this far back into Kiryu's childhood. I think the youngest we've seen him was in Zero, maybe in Yakuza 2, but nothing like this. And I think it's really cool that the first half of this movie is basically all original content. We also get to see quite a bit more of Kazama in this movie, which is really good because his screen time in the first couple of Yakuza games is super limited. So I think any more screen time with him is great. At about the 20-minute mark, Kiryu and Nishikiyama leave the orphanage to go to Kamurocho so they can become Yakuza. We're also introduced to Sohei Dojima here, who is bald in this movie instead of having hair like he does in the original game. We then cut to years later and we see Kiryu fighting in the street. We then get a scene of Kiryu showing Nishiki his finished tattoo, and I think the dragon tattoo looks really good in this movie. We then get a scene of Yumi arriving in Kamurocho looking for work, and then from here on out, it's basically a complete adaptation of the prologue of the first Yakuza game. The dialogue is even pretty much one-to-one. We get to see Kiryu, Nishiki, and Yumi drinking at Serena. Kiryu goes to drop off some money from his collections to Kazama, and then Kiryu rushes back to the Dojima family offices to find that Dojima's dead and Nishiki's the killer. Kiryu takes the fall for the murder and goes to prison for it because Nishiki needs to be there for his dying sister. And then we get some extra scenes that weren't in the game that kind of show what happened right after Kiryu went to prison, but like not before the 10-year time jump. Think of these as kind of a proto-version of the Nishiki scenes that were added in Yakuza Kiwami but weren't in the original version of the game. We see Yumi and Nishiki's escape from the scene of the crime, and we see flashbacks showing the actual murder of Dojima, Yumi's parents getting killed, and then we see Yumi's amnesia start to set in. Nishiki goes to visit Yumi in the hospital, but she's gone, and then we cut and we see that she's walking to Sunflower Orphanage and is arriving there where Kazama finds her. And that's how the movie ends. You didn't get a trailer for the first game that has shots from literally like the third to last scene of the game. I don't know why they put that in the trailer, but whatever. Receive You starts playing, then we get the ominous message that for Kiryu, Nishiki, and Yumi, the gears of fate have begun turning. And then the credits start to roll. I really like this movie. I really like how the first half is all original content, and then the second half is basically just one-to-one adaptation of the opening of the game. It's kind of like the Killing Joke movie, except the first half of that movie sucked, and here I think the first half is the best part. I think it's great to see how far back Kiryu and Nishiki's friendship goes, especially because that was something that was lacking in the first game, and it really took Zero and then the Kiwami scenes to really expound upon it and make it more believable. Because just with the stuff that's there in the first Yakuza game, Nishiki isn't a very compelling villain in my opinion. Especially considering when this came out, which was right after the first game did, this was the only place where you'd get any of this backstory from, because none of it was in the actual game. Honestly, if it was just the first Yakuza game and then this movie, I would consider this necessary watching before playing the game. I also really like the casting in this movie. The standout is Mikio Osawa, which I think I pronounced that right, but correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. He's the guy who plays Nishiki, and I think he's spot on to the version from the game. Kiryu's actor, Masakatsu Funaki, who's a Japanese pro wrestler, doesn't really look like him very much, but I think he definitely has the build to play Kiryu. And I think he does a pretty good job in this movie too. Although sadly, with the release of Yakuza 0, this movie I'm pretty sure has been retconned into being non-canon. Although I can't find any official statements on this, and it's been a couple of years since I played Yakuza 0, so my recollection of the events that pertain to Kiryu Nishiki's childhood in that game are really fuzzy, so this might fit in well enough where it doesn't cause any problems. I'm not 100% sure. I saw people saying conflicting things about it when I looked it up on Reddit, which I figured would probably be the best place to look for the canon status of this movie. I saw some people say that it fits in well, some people say that Zero completely nullifies it, so it seems like it's more just up to you. As for my personal opinion though, I like to think that it's still canon just because I think it's a really quality movie. As for my thoughts on the actual movie itself though, again, I think it's great. I think all the original content that it adds is worthwhile, and it adds a lot to the story of the first game. And I think all the scenes from the first game that are in this movie, I think were adapted very faithfully. But I would definitely recommend checking this out if you haven't. It's on YouTube, subtitled, free to watch, only 40 minutes long, so it's not a very big, time commitment. Honestly, if you're bored one day and you need something to watch while you're eating or something, I'd throw it on. I think it's a good time. Our next adaptation we're covering is the 2007 movie, Like a Dragon, and if you're familiar with any of them, this is probably the one you're most familiar with. This is another adaptation of the first Yakuza game, and is considered a bit of a pseudo-sequel to the Prologue movie. And this one is unfortunately not available to watch subtitled in English for free on YouTube. It was, as of pretty recently, I think a couple months ago, but it got taken down due to copyright. There is, however, a Spanish subtitled track version of the movie that is up on YouTube to watch, so if you can read Spanish, that's a way to check it out. As for other ways to watch it, it's on Prime Video, but not in the US, so you need a VPN to watch it there. But I'm pretty sure you can find an upload of the movie somewhere else online in English if you look hard enough. Or if you want to do things the legal way, you could always buy a DVD copy, because this did get an English DVD release, but it goes for about $30 online. So not crazy, but I wouldn't pay $30 to watch this movie. Whereas the Prologue movie was an official tie-in meant to fill in some extra gaps of information that were left open in the original game, this is just a more straight-up adaptation of the first game. Sort of. This movie just takes the characters and some of the broad strokes from the plot of the first game and just runs and does its own thing with it. And I won't go too in-depth on the plot here because it is, I think, worth checking out just to see where it differs from the original game. But if you're familiar with the plot of the original Yakuza game, you pretty much get the gist. And this movie is directed by Takashi Miike, who is a very prolific Japanese filmmaker. He also was an executive director on the Prologue film we just talked about. You might not recognize the name, because I know I didn't, but you'll probably recognize some of the stuff he's directed, because he's done a ton of adaptations of different video games and manga. Some of the movies he's directed include Ichi the Killer, which I know is a super notorious movie, although I haven't seen it myself. He directed the live-action Diamond is Unbreakable movie from a couple of years back, which I heard was alright. He also directed the live-action Ace Attorney movie. The movie that I recognized, though, and really jumped out to me was As the Gods Will. You might remember this, though, from a couple of years ago, because How to Beat made a video on it that went super viral, and really kind of spiked interest in the kind of death game genre of movies and TV. That kind of really culminated later that year when a show, you might have heard of it, it's called Squid Game, came out. So Takashi Miike basically made Squid Game before Squid Game. Alright, well now I'm getting sidetracked, but the point is, Takashi Miike is a really big deal in the world of Japanese cinema. It's also worth noting that he has the reputation of being very hit or miss with his movies. As for the actual movie itself, it's kind of a so bad it's good thing. As for the good, I think that the casting and costume design is really good, especially the tattoos in the final fight scene I think look really good on Kiryu Nishiki. Majima's actor, Goro Kishitani, absolutely steals the show here. He's my personal highlight of the movie, and he's a lot of other people's too, and for good reason. He does a great job of bringing this character to life, who up until this point still hadn't had a lot of screen time in the actual video game. There's also just a lot of scenes in this movie that are really good on their own without the context of the rest of the movie around it. The highlight is the scene where Kiryu gets jumped in a convenience store. That's a really fun fight scene. All of Kiryu and Majima's fight scenes are really good in this movie. They've got the fight at the batting cages, they've got the infamous shotgun duel. The final fight between Kiryu and Nishiki feels a little weak in this movie. It's not terrible by any means, but it feels a little over-edited. There's also a lot of unnecessary details that add to the charm of this movie. One of the ones that comes to mind is how Jingu is played by Nagoshi here, which Nagoshi, if you're unfamiliar, was the old director of the series. He's more of a glorified cameo than an actual character in this movie, but it's still fun to see him here. There's also a part in the final fight where Kiryu's getting ganged up on, and so he drinks a stamina to charge his heat up. There's a lot of little things like this that add to the charm of the movie, and they make it a fun time. Overall, I think this movie is a worse adaptation than the Prologue movie, but that's not to say it's bad. It's a lot less accurate to the source material, and it's a very, very, very schlocky movie, but it's still a really fun watch. You should at the very least check out the video that compiles all of Majima's scenes from the movie into one video. I'll leave a link to it in the description and up in the corner. And now we jump forward a few years to the release of the Kurohyo games in Japan. Although these games never released in the Americas or Europe, they must have been a huge deal back in Japan because these two games in particular got quite a bit of adapting. And first we'll be taking a look at the Kio TV Series, which got 2 seasons and ran between 2010 and 2012. Seasons 1 and 2 of the TV show came out alongside and adapted Kio 1 and 2 respectively. This whole series is available to watch on YouTube, however, there's no subtitles and the YouTube auto-translate subtitles don't work for most of the videos in the series. There's a separate project on YouTube to subtitle the series in English, but they only got 3 parts in before they dropped it altogether. So if you don't speak Japanese, you're basically out of luck with watching this one. The uploader who compiled the whole series onto YouTube does have pinned comments on each of their YouTube videos saying that they're looking for someone to help them subtitle the series into English, but it doesn't seem like they've had any luck in their search. I basically just skimmed through the whole series, and from what I can tell, it looks really good. The series is sitting at over an 8 out of 10 on IMDb, so clearly the people enjoy it. It seems to be shot pretty well. The acting is, which is hard to judge the acting because obviously I can't understand what a lot of the actors are saying, but it seems really solid from what I can tell. And then the fight scenes seem pretty good for a TV show. They're not like Daredevil level fight scenes, but what is, you know? From what I've gathered online, the story of the actual games deviates quite a bit from the games themselves, especially in the second season, but again, I can't comment on that because I've yet to play the Kio games yet, and I'm not going to do too much of a deep dive because I don't want to spoil myself on them. So that is something to keep in mind. If you have played the fan translations of Kio and seek out to watch this show, you might be caught off guard by some changes. I'm mostly just impressed that this show got 2 seasons and adapted the whole Kio series. I mean, even though the Kio series is only 2 games long, that still seems like a big enough feat in and of itself that the whole series got adapted. The first Kio game also got a 3-volume manga adaptation, which looks really good. Well, I can't comment on the story because the only part of this that has been translated into English is the very first chapter of the first volume. Everything else has been untouched by translators. I think the artwork looks really good, and considering it's a manga, outside of the artwork and the writing, there's not really a whole lot to comment on. So maybe it wasn't very good because Kio 2 did not get a manga adaptation, which I feel like they'd be more likely to get the manga than the second season of the TV show, so maybe it wasn't very good. I'm pretty sure you could find a digital upload of the manga online to read if you look hard enough, like an ebook type thing. You'd probably just need like Google Translate on your phone, just take pictures of to translate the pages. Probably won't be a very good translation, but it'll be enough to get you through the story. Or if you want the physical copy of it, there are sellers on eBay selling it for honestly not too bad, only like $10 a volume, $15 a volume, so if you're interested in owning it for collector's sake, there you go. The shipping prices would probably be pretty bad though, because this never came out outside of Japan. Then, in 2015, for the 10th anniversary of the Yakuza series, Sega produced a full stage play adaptation of the original game. The story here is pretty much identical to the original game, especially in comparison to the 2007 film. The play sticks much closer to the source material. The biggest change here is that Ryuji Goto makes a couple cameo appearances here, which sounds out of left field, but it really isn't. This is because in Yakuza 2, the game where Ryuji originates from, it was revealed that he actually played a part in the original game's plot, because Jingu, the main villain of the first game, had Yakuza at his disposal, and in Yakuza 2, it was revealed that they were Ryuji's family he was using. So the play just adds a couple scenes of them interacting to kind of cement that they're working together during the events of the original game. Which is honestly kind of interesting because Ryuji's involvement in the original game is a plot point that I feel like a lot of people forget about, myself included. I think that's why it comes as such a shock to a lot of people when they watch the play and then they see Ryuji show up seemingly out of nowhere. I thought he was just thrown in there because of how much of a fan favorite character he is, which absolutely plays a part in it, but it's not as out of nowhere as some might think. If you can only watch one adaptation of the original Yakuza game, because most of these are adaptations of the original game, I would go with the stage play, 100%. Just a few months ago, as of when I'm making this video, it was uploaded to YouTube in its entirety, fully subtitled in English, free to watch, so it's easier than ever to enjoy. It's a beefy 2.5 hours long, so they don't have to cut anything for time. It's basically just the first game story in its entirety. I feel like this is a very worthwhile and very faithful adaptation of that original Yakuza game. There's also just a bunch of highlights with the play. The casting is all super solid, and the costuming is all spot on, like every character dresses like they're straight out of the original game. The fight choreography is also really good in my opinion, which I can't imagine how hard it is to get fights to look good on stage, you know? So the fact they pull it off just really impresses me. They also have the soundtrack from the game playing over the different scenes and fight scenes, and it's the original game soundtrack, not the Kiwami soundtrack. which I prefer because I think that kind of grungy, dirty sound of the original game soundtrack fits the vibe of the story a lot better than the upbeat, I wouldn't say upbeat, but than the high-tempo techno there is in the Kiwami version. Kiwami's electronic soundtrack just always struck me as being really out of place. They also have a big projector screen, or just big screen. I can't really tell if it's a projector or an actual screen, but they have like the names and the family crest of whoever's Kiryu fighting pop up there. There's a couple of scenes where they'll have just cutscenes from the game playing up there for scenes that like they couldn't just do on stage. They'll just have the cutscene display what's happening. And this isn't for like actual like fight scenes or dialogue. This is for like when the Millennium Tower explodes, that type of stuff. It's just very charming in my opinion. And if I was going to just sit here and talk about everything I liked about this stage play, we'd be here for another half hour. So I really do highly recommend you to check out the play when you have some free time though. That's the one bad thing with it, is unlike the Prologue movie where it's a 40-minute time commitment, this is 2.5 hours. But if you're a fan of the series and you have yet to check out the stage play yet, I highly recommend you do. I can guarantee that you won't regret it. Up next, we have a 4-part miniseries released in 2016 to coincide with the release of Yakuza 6, The Song of Life. The show is Yakuza Soul Song, or Yakuza The Song of Soul. I've seen it translated multiple ways. And this show might as well not exist out of Japan. There's no English release of it, there's no English subtitled version of it. I can't find any fan translations of it. All I can really find is the trailer on YouTube, the IMDb listing which has the cast, and then an interview that's in English, which is actually really interesting. That's the one thing that I can find in English. The interview is on a website called Gamatsu, and it is interviewing Nagoshi, the series' old lead. According to Nagoshi, Kiryu doesn't even make an appearance in the show. He's more just mentioned in passing and name-dropped as a legendary figure, which reminds me kind of how he was treated at the beginning of Yakuza 4. Also, according to this interview, the show is about 4 young Yakuza from Onamichi who travel to Kamurocho in an attempt to rise up in the world, and that's all I can tell you about the show. But considering I haven't heard anyone ever mention the show, and I only learned about it like 2 weeks ago, I doubt it's anything too crazy. Like the one English thing that I saw commenting on the actual quality of the show, the guy said it was nothing special, so I'm going to take his word on it. The show is available to watch on Amazon Prime Japan, so if you can understand Japanese and you want to check it out, that's where you can do so. And this brings us to the present day, where nothing new has released since Soul Song, at least as far as I can find. There is, however, a new Yakuza TV show in production currently, which has been confirmed to be an adaptation of Yakuza Kiwami. It's going to be an 8-episode season, and I'm guessing it's going to have the potential, if this first season does well when it comes out, that they might do other games in the series. This adaptation of the story will probably be much more like the stage play than the 07 movie, and how close it sticks to the source material, but that's not really saying a whole lot. Filming began in June of last year, 2023, so I'd probably expect the show to release sometime, maybe end of 2024, or sometime through 2025. I honestly wouldn't be too surprised if they released it in 2025 in order to line up with the 20th anniversary of the series, like how they did a bunch of stuff for the 10th anniversary. Whether or not the show will be any good, or if it'll even be readily available in English to watch, that's something only time can tell. There's definitely a much better chance of this show being made available to watch in English, or at least subtitled, just because of how much more prominent the series is over here in the West than it was, even 10 years ago. Out of all these adaptations, my personal favorites are definitely the Prologue movie and then the stage play. The play is just a really, really good adaptation, but I think the Prologue movie stands really well as a good adaptation because it adapts to the first 20 minutes of the first Yakuza game very well. And it was a very good companion piece because the extra 20 minutes of context it adds, I think, add a lot to that first game's story. Now we have Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami adding all these extra scenes to kind of show us how deep Kiryu and Nishiki's bond goes. But back in 06 when this Prologue movie came out, there was none of that. So I would honestly consider this probably like required watching for the time to really fully appreciate the story. This Prologue did, back when the first game came out, what Zero and Kiwami do now, where they give you more of an opportunity to get connected to Nishiki so that his betrayal in the story actually has weight to it, whereas in the original Yakuza game, I feel like it really wouldn't have much weight because you hardly knew him when he betrays you. But that's just an opinion. A game opinion. Anyways, I had a ton of fun researching and making this video, guys. If you liked the video, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe to show your support. It really means a lot. This is Tactic Zombie signing off. Peace out. God bless. I'll catch you next time.
Yeah, cause I got it like that. Flow so smooth like I got it on tap. Yeah, and I'ma say it be a good night while I'm on my Yingling, while I'm drinking Bud Light. Can you get it when you miss me?